welcome to the February meeting of the COA Committee of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. I'm Nick Fountain. I'm the chair of the COA Committee. There are a few things that I'm going to say that many of you have heard at prior meetings, but I'll run through that. We're doing this meeting remotely on account of the pandemic, and we're following statutes adopted by the North Carolina General Assembly, and we're doing it remotely under that authority. That's Session Law 2020-3, allowed for remote meetings and hearings during declarations of emergency. And that's the way we've been proceeding for since about last June, I guess. Everyone on this agenda was notified that this meeting would be done remotely. Everyone has consented to proceed in that way, and we will double check that as we go forward with these matters. But notice has been provided to everyone in many ways, by mail to the property owners within 100 feet, by signs on the property, by publication, and we're not moving forward with any matter today where we have heard from anyone indicating they have an objection to proceeding with this remote format. Anyone who wishes to participate in the hearing today had to sign up before the meeting, and the sign up mechanism was made known to everyone in their notifications. They're also required to turn in copies of whatever presentation so that we would have those things in advance, and that has all happened as well. Everyone also was provided a witness oath form, and we will be taking steps to be sure that everyone who appears in front of us will have taken the oath as a witness in this process. So with that lead in, I will ask staff to call the roll, and I'll ask each of you on the committee to speak up when you hear your name.
Nick Fountain.
Here.
Vershay Height. Harold Millette. Janine
McAuliffe here.
Sorry, Janine McAuliffe. I looked, I was waiting. I did not hear Harold, so I looked up.
Oh, yes, here. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Now I can. John Reese.
Here.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everybody. I think at this point, I will let everyone introduce themselves to the folks who are listening, and tell and each of us tell them what is our background and why we are on the COA committee. So I'll start by saying I'm Nick Fountain. I live in a Raleigh historic landmark, and I'm a lawyer by profession, and this is my 4th year on the commission this go round. So Janine, how about you?
Thank you. Janine McAuliffe. My background is in architecture. I live and work here in Raleigh and as a residential designer, and this is my 3rd year on the commission.
Harold?
Yes, Harold Millette, had a master's in architecture, worked for a firm, an architecture firm in Cameron Village, and born and raised in Raleigh, and interested in just the architectural history of the city.
John Reese.
Hi, I'm John Reese. I am an architect here in Raleigh. I live in the Glenwood, Brooklyn neighborhood, and am interested simply because of both those 2 reasons.
Thank you for that. And folks, the other face you see on the screen is Francis Raspberry, our esteemed counsel. And Francis, do you want to give yourself a more dramatic introduction than I just did?
Nick, you've probably covered the field. Just to know I'm not a commissioner, I'm legal counsel.
That got to stop. I hope that doesn't happen again. So now to move to the other matters. Firstly, we will need to approve the agenda, but before we do, I need to find out if anyone wishes to have any of the summary proceeding matters on the agenda heard rather than handled summarily. The summary proceeding on today's agenda is 125 North Harrington Street, the old CP&L car barn, and offices of Klein Design Associates. Does anybody want to hear that other than summarily? Okay, hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Janine McAuliffe moves to approve the agenda. John Reed seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye and raise your hands. Okay, all the hands went up, and so that carried unanimously. I vote aye also. Then the next thing is approval of the minutes of the January 28, 21 meeting. All of you should have had opportunity to review that. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January meeting. Janine McAuliffe makes that motion. Harold Millette seconds the motion. Any discussion or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand. All right, I see Janine, Harold, John, and I vote aye as well, and the minutes are approved. So now we'll move to the summary proceedings, and that is the matter of removal of an awning and construction of an elevated terrace outside the offices of Klein Design Associates on the second floor level. And I will entertain a motion to accept the staff comments as findings of fact and adopt the recommendation of staff with respect to that application. And Janine McAuliffe makes a motion to do so with respect to that summary proceeding. John Reese seconds that motion. Any discussion with respect to the Klein Design patio, shall we say? If nothing, all in favor signify by saying aye. All hands went up. That motion carries unanimously with the four of us. And I presume, for the benefit of everyone here, that Rashay Height will join us. We learned that she's going to be late, and hopefully she will be with us in a little bit. So the next matter is consideration of 1301, excuse me, Fillmore Street, the property of Elizabeth Ranchap. That is file number COA 114-2020. The only person who is signed up to speak is Colette Canane. And so Colette, I will ask you to swear or I'll administer the oath to you, Colette, and then you can explain this matter to us.
Nick, actually, this is Colette. The applicant cannot be present this evening. So staff's recommendation to you all is to defer to the next month. But because of the timeline, the deferral requires a vote.
I see. All right. I did not know we had heard from the applicant at all, but that's fine with me. Could we have a motion to defer action on that application until the applicant will be here? John Reese makes that motion. Janine seconds the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. The motion carries unanimously, and we will carry forward the 1301 Fillmore Street matter. And with that, members of the committee, I will hand the ball to Janine McAuliffe to preside with respect to the matter of 215 East Cabrera Street, because I'm going to recuse from participation in that matter because I've been involved in discussions by and between the property owners. And so with that, I will listen up and be ready to pick back up after that matter is concluded.
Okay, thank you. I will probably need a little bit of staff assistance with this, not my typical role here, but this is case 0137-2020, 215 East Cabrera Street in the Prince Hall District. And this is application that is coming back to us this meeting. And I think we have 3 people to swear in to speak to this matter, and so it's I'm sorry, it's Aaron Morton, is that correct? And Fred Belladin and Edna Valentine, who I've got to swear in?
Hey, Janine, this is Erin. That's correct.
Okay, perfect. I guess I'll go one by one. Is that correct, Aaron? One by one?
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
Janine, Tanya here. You should have received the cheat sheet via email just now,
Just now. Okay, great.
if that is helpful to you.
It really would be. Yep. Hold on a second. Okay. Let's see. All right, I've got it, and I'm gonna first do staff affirmation, and this is for Aaron Morton. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And then this is for Fred Belladin. Are you here?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, okay. Mr. Belladin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And I know there is a third person. Is it Edna Valentine?
Hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Ms. Valentine, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. This is now for the, excuse me.
So Janine, next we can just jump right into the staff presentation. If
Okay.
that works for you.
That works for me, Aaron. That would be you.
All right. Just give us one moment to get it pulled up. All right, this is, as Janine stated, this is case COA 137-2020 for 215 East Cabarrus Street in the Prince Hall Historic District. A portion of this application was previously approved at the December 2020 meeting, and the remaining outstanding items that were deferred for additional information are altering the driveway and alter landscaping. Next. So these are a series of photos the committee has already seen of the property. The landscaping in the front, the bushes, I believe is the part of the landscaping that's in the application for removal. Next. And you can see the existing driveway to the east side of the house that's also a pending piece of the application. Next. And more of the driveway. Skirting between the two houses. The subject property is on the left in this photo. Next. And you can just toggle through these, Tanya. This is just images of the rear of the property and the existing outbuilding and some siding replacements. So staff suggestion is to approve with conditions.
Okay, thank you. Now I would like to see if the applicant has any information they'd like to share.
Sure, a couple of minor comments. To clarify, this driveway is shared with the owners of the subject property, Eric and Irene Green, and with the neighbor to the east, Edna Rich Ballantyne, who I believe is also signed up to speak. We have no objection to any of the staff comments to hold the driveway a few inches off the house on either side. The only request is after consultation with Edna, she would prefer that we substitute the gravel between the wheel strips for brick. So we would like to request brick as the infill in lieu of gravel, with the brick submittal to be approved by staff. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I think I will ask if there is anybody else wishing to speak on this matter.
Yes, ma'am. I'm back on.
Thank you, yes.
All right, my name is Edna Rich Ballantyne, and My preference is to continue this matter until all legal documents are agreed upon, signed, and filed. As it relates to the design proposal, I prefer the brick as it is more visually appealing, but the gravel is an acceptable option. If this proceeds, I don't agree to the installation at this time. I'm fine with the design of the driveway as it exists. My primary concern is that my property rights are protected and recorded.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I guess I would just like to ask if maybe I could get you to clarify maybe what the legal documents were that you were asking or you were referring to that you wanted to have clarity on.
We have a shared driveway almost down the middle. And I want to be sure that my side of the driveway has all the easements and encroachments done. We want to make sure there's no transfer of property. Were you able to hear me?
Yes, I did. Thank you for that. This might be a question for staff, but staff, does that have bearing on us making a decision on this matter? Or maybe it's a question for Raz.
Hey, Janine, this is Erin. I will kick it to Raz and or Tanya for additional clarification, but it's my understanding that the COA approval process doesn't grant the applicant permission to do any work on property that they do not own. And then property matter disputes would be settled between property owners outside of the process. Raz, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's true. I think you have the discretion. If you wanted to make a decision, you could. But if the other speakers would consent to the deferral, because we don't know really the relationship between the two neighbors in terms of getting this ownership and easement matter resolved. I can understand Ms. Ballantyne's position, but I do think you have the discretion to make a decision if that's your choice, because it doesn't affect in any way the property rights between the two parties, between the two owners, rather.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to make comments regarding this application at this time?
Yes.
And if not,
Yes,
go ahead.
this is Fred again.
Okay.
Is it okay if I sort of address, Edna, this is tough with it all being remote. As part of this, the applicant isn't here, which is why I can't really speak for them. Edna, I'm caught off guard a little bit. My understanding from Nick is that this was okay to proceed because this is unrelated to your cross-access agreement. If you would like to continue to hold it, I think that's up to you. As Raz confirmed, Eric and Irene cannot do any work on your property with or without the COA, without your approval to have that encroachment, but the lack of the COA is holding up their renovation. So without this, they may elect just to pull the driveway portion entirely and keep everything as it is if they're not able to get approval. Does that make sense?
And Mr. Bellinger, are you actually, you're directing that to
I'm
balance?
at the risk of being improper, I'm trying to direct it to Edna, yes.
Okay. I did say in here, as it relates to the design proposal, I find the brick inlay more visually appealing, but the gravel is also an acceptable option. So if you all wanted to vote on just the design, I'm fine with that. The other, how is it holding up the rest of the program?
This is a part of the COA, Edna. So what Eric and Irene have told me was they need to get the COA approved today to continue with the work, to stay on schedule. So if you're not comfortable approving the COA, I think they're just going to pull the driveway and not improve the driveway. So it's really up to you. Or if you're comfortable proceeding with the COA, as Francis Raspberry noted, they are not allowed to do any work on your property regardless until you and they have come to whatever agreement you're looking for on the cross-access agreement.
Janine, this is Aaron. Is it all right if I add some comment here?
Yes, please.
Tanya, if you want to jump in and confirm this for me, in December, because that portion of the application was approved, it is able to move forward when conditions are provided to meet what was approved in December. Is that the case, Tanya?
Tanya, we're not hearing you.
It looked like she's unmuted, but I can't, if she's speaking, Tanya, we cannot hear you. Or Raz, do you know the technical pieces of the COA process there? It's my understanding that this could be approved in part and denied in part. Can the approved part move ahead?
You all have done that. I think it'd be necessary to make changes in the findings and conclusions in the order that you recommended. But I think you can do that. You have done that in the past.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Tanya here. What I said that you couldn't hear before is that the way the portion of the application was approved in December, there were findings of fact and conclusions of law for everything except for the driveway and the landscaping. And once conditions have been provided and approved for those items, we will be able to issue a blue placard, which will allow them to pull permits. Does that answer the question?
I was understanding the question was, could we, okay, so that answers the question where we are now. And then my question is, does it make sense for us to have a mechanism whereby we can approve everything so that they can get their placard for the remaining work that was approved and then push this driveway portion, defer that, I guess, if we need to. And I guess that's something we haven't confirmed either. If we really,
that's where you are. Everything else has been approved except for the driveway. That's the whole reason we're here today.
but I'm saying it sounds like if we don't make this decision today, the rest of the work that was approved cannot proceed. Isn't that correct?
I don't understand how that can be true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is Aaron. It's that was the clarification I was looking for from Tanya. So because we have made findings of fact, voted on a decision for the rest of the application and placed the conditions on it, it's able to move ahead as soon as those conditions are met with its own placard. So there's nothing holding that piece up except receiving conditions. I don't know if there's other parts of the, building permit process or easement needs that are holding it up separately.
This is Fred. Could I jump in once more? And I apologize if I misunderstood. My understanding was that we couldn't proceed with anything until everything was approved. So if the work that was approved in December can proceed, I'll leave it up to the owners whether they want to pull the driveway or not if this is continued. But that's helpful. So thank you, Tanya and Aaron, for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
So now are we allowing the neighbor then, Ms. Rich Valentine, to determine if there needs to be more time on that driveway before we make a vote on that?
Tanya Tully here. It is up to you to decide if you want to defer it one more month out of consideration for Miss Valentine, or if you feel like there's enough information to make a decision and you discuss and decide. There's no impending deadline requiring you to make a decision today.
Well, I think in light of this being sort of a unique situation we're just hearing about now, I would propose that we do let that driveway work, not make a decision on that today. I'm not quite exactly clear what legal proceedings they're looking to remedy, but if that's something that Ms. Rich Valentine would prefer to try to let that proceed before we make this vote, I'm amenable to that.
Okay. I'm accepting the design proposal. I just don't want the installation to start. And what you all are asking for is, do I accept the design? Yes, I
Right.
accept the design, not the installation.
Okay, thank you for that. And let me just clarify with Raz just quickly here. If we make a vote on the design and it's approved, that work cannot be done until whatever these legal issues are getting cleared up. I want to make sure we're not putting this out of sequence.
That is correct. And if you wanted to affirm that in your order, you could add as a condition that this is intended to approve the design only and has no effect on the rights of the parties and the property matters that need to be worked out between the adjacent owners.
Thank you. Well, in light of that, I feel like we should go ahead and discuss this driveway and the design of it, because I think that feels as though that's an appropriate next step here. So is there any other, before I close the public hearing, any other comments anybody needs to make? Okay, with that, I'll close the evidentiary hearing and open discussion to the commissioners. What are your all thoughts on the proposed driveway with the modifications that we're discussing now? John?
I don't have any red flags at all. I think it's pretty straightforward, and given that the neighbor is very pleased with the idea of doing brick or gravel, and that can be worked out with staff, I think it would be fine to proceed based on staff's recommendations.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Or does somebody want to make a motion? John Reese wants to make a motion.
Yes, based on the information contained in, I move that based on the information contained in the application, staff's evaluation, and this evidentiary hearing, that altering the driveway and altering landscaping is not incongruous according to guidelines sections 1.3.1, 0.2, 1.5.5, 0.6, and 1.5.8. However, the location of a new driveway directly abutting the principal structure is congruous. However, the location of a new driveway directly abutting the principal structure is incongruous according to guideline sections 1.5.7 with the following suggested facts, 1 through 5, that we approve the application with the following conditions: that the driveway not directly abut any historic structure, and that the following materials be provided and approved by staff prior to issuance of the blue placard, that the revised driveway design and site plan, and the driveway material specifications, including the brick that has been suggested, be worked out directly with staff.
And do we want to add, can we amend to that, John, something about the properties?
Yes, and that go ahead.
Sorry, this is Erin. If we could get a vote on the motion of findings of fact first and a vote, and then work on the conditions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Aye. And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. And then is there a second to that?
Yeah, and I'll follow up with the staff recommendations that the committee approve the application with the following conditions 1 and 2 as noted before. As I mentioned, and referencing A and B, and then also including and adding on to that is that no construction begin until the legal issues are resolved between the two parties involved.
Question, do we need to be specific about the driveway construction not beginning specifically? Or is it, that's just a question.
Let me throw that in there as a caveat that it be the driveway work specifically not be started until the legal easements and issues are dealt with.
All right. Is there a second to that motion? Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand. Say aye. That's Carol and John and Berchet and myself. So that is unanimous. I think then, thank you. I think that case is completed, and thank you to the applicant and to Ms. Edna Rich Valentine. And I will pass this back to our chair, Nick. I'm very glad you're back. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was very difficult. Gosh, you had no idea how hard it was for me to sit there and watch and not say what what I thought would help simplify things for everybody. But thank you all for carrying the ball. I think at this point we need a motion to allow me back on the committee for the rest of the meeting. And so
Can I make that
makes that motion, and Janine seconds it, and all in favor say aye. Okay, so thank you for that, everybody. Yeah, the whole thing is it's just there's a driveway agreement that needs to be put on paper, and even if there are people who've been sharing that space for 75 or 90 years, it probably needs to be on paper. And so I'm sorry for that to drag out for the rest of you. So the next matter to come before us is 713 Oberlin Road, Ted Van Dyke, New City Design, and that's file number 174-2020. We have a number of speakers here, and I'll ask that I'll start with Colette, and then Ted Van Dyke, and I don't know how many of the rest of you are going to wind up wanting to speak. But I'll ask for all of you that do expect that you will, before it's over with, have something to say. Then I want to administer the oath to you. And so I ask you, do you and each of you swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give in the matter being heard will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Colette?
This is Colette.
And you say aye or yes, I suppose. Ted Van Dyke?
I do.
Okay, who else?
Jennifer Ashton. I do.
Jennifer Ashton, okay, you say aye.
Yes.
Is Michael Birch going to talk?
No, he is not.
David Gorman?
Aye. I'm
Okay,
here.
aye. Jim Anthony?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Sabrina Good?
I do.
And Art Ross?
I do.
Okay, now then, and I will say to you that, to all of you, that I've had a telephone conversation with Mr. Anthony and with Art Ross, Dr. Ross, my once and former pastor, concerning the procedures for this matter, but I've not gotten involved in substantive discussions with either of them, and I don't feel that that will cause me to be unable to participate in the matter, but nevertheless, I make that disclosure. That said, Colette, would you explain the proposal? And I think that we're proceeding in a slightly different way than maybe we would normally, by somewhat bifurcating this, and so perhaps you could explain that as well.
Thank you, Nick. So first, I'll start with a short introduction. This is case 174-2020. It is 713 Oberlin Road, located in the Oberlin Village Historic District. The request is to construct a detached house, 9 townhomes, a driveway, and a parking lot. But this is an application you've heard before, so these pictures may be familiar. But as a refresher, this is a view north from Oberlin, another view from Oberlin, Next slide. This is looking south on Oberlin. Next slide. And this is from Roberts Street. Next slide. So staff's first suggestion was to defer until the following information is provided, which was a visual of how the townhomes are sited in comparison to neighboring properties along Oberlin, a site plan with building footprints that distinguish between the body of the house and the porches, and elevation drawings of each side of the proposed buildings. Next slide. However, if you would like to have a discussion, we recommend discussing the height and mass specifically in light of the following guidelines. And we called out specifically 3.3.1, cite new construction to be congruous with surrounding historic buildings that contribute to the special character of the historic district in terms of setback, orientation, spacing, and distance from adjacent historic buildings. Next slide. 3.3.7, design new buildings to be congruous with surrounding buildings that contribute to the special character of the historic district in terms of height, form, size, scale, massing, proportion, architectural style, and roof shape. The height of new buildings should generally fall within 10% of well-related nearby buildings. 3.3.8, design the proportion of the proposed new building's front facade to be compatible with the front facade proportion of surrounding historic buildings. And 3.3.11, design new buildings so they're compatible with but discernible from contributing buildings in the district. Next slide. So the new information that's been provided is a presentation from the applicant reviewing the information provided, which will follow this, an updated site plan, and a visual of the setback at 801 Oberlin. So as Nick mentioned, we did proceed slightly differently with this staff report. We compiled the report focusing on height, massing, and setback and footprint because those are the big picture items. While the architectural design will come later and is important, it's more important to determine whether or not a building can be built on this site and what its maximum proportions might be. So that is how we wrote the report and structured, hopefully, your conversation today. And Ted, I believe, is the speaker for the applicant, and he can go through the presentation.
But hang on a minute before you do that, Colette. With respect to the first slide that you put up after the photographs where you talked about deferring, I thought the general idea is that we would have this discussion about mass and scale and the like, and let everyone know how that was, and that we not defer that. But please explain to me that first slide you had up a minute ago, Tanya. If you want to go back, put that up there again to answer my question.
This is Colette. There were a couple things I felt would help the conversation. One of those was a site plan that was dimensioned with the building footprint, and a updated site plan was provided by the applicants. We had asked for updated elevation drawings, but I think the details of those elevation drawings are less relevant to the discussion that we would like you to have. And we also asked for a visual of how the townhouses are sited in comparison with neighboring properties. And I believe that the site plan does show a half a block in each direction, I think. And some new information was provided about the 900 block of Oberlin Road and how those properties are sited, which I believe are the nearest historic buildings on Oberlin.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That clarifies for me. I thought the general idea is that the property owners needed guidance so that they could move forward in the appropriate direction, and that we ought to address the masking and scale piece of this.
Yes, that is correct.
Rather than waste a lot of pen and ink on things that if we didn't even get past the threshold question. So with that, thank you. And Ms. Van Dyke, I would love to hear from you at this time with respect to your presentation. And as you go through it, I trust you will talk as you go about whatever's different from the last time and since you've been to the DRAC or whatever.
Absolutely. I think we have Allison with us from Michael Birch's office, and she was going to introduce the presentation and talk to us a little more about what it is exactly we're trying to achieve tonight, if that's all right, Nick. And then I'll go on to our presentation.
That's sure. That's perfectly okay. And you're breaking up a little bit, and so while she's talking, maybe you can figure out what's going on with your microphone.
I'll do it.
All right, Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jennifer Ashton. I'm a land use attorney with the firm of Longleaf Law Partners. My address for the record is 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302 in Raleigh, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant for the project located at 713 Oberlin Road. I'm joined on the phone by the development team, which includes Ted Van Dyke from New City Design. He is the project architect. David Gorman from Lock 7 Development, who is the proposed developer, and also Jim Anthony, who is the property owner. At this time, I'd like to formally submit our presentation into the record, just because this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, if that would be acceptable to the chair.
Certainly, we accept that, and we will certainly consider all of the presentation as well as the staff's comment.
Thank you.
And anything that anybody says here today.
Thank you. Before I begin, I would like to offer our thanks to city staff for their work on this project to date. Colette and Tanya have both been fantastic, and we really appreciate their guidance in getting us here. To that end, Colette did give you a summary of the narrowed scope for tonight's hearing, which we completely agree with. As Colette mentioned, we will be focusing on 3 big ticket items for this project, which are going to be the building height, the massing, and then the setback and the footprints. We're, like Colette mentioned, we are trying to figure out what the max proportions for these buildings are going to be on site and whether this is going to be a viable project. If we are able to get conceptual approval for those 3 big ticket items, then we will come back for another hearing at a later date to discuss the architectural design and the other minutia of the project. So at that other hearing is where we'll be talking about design elements such as windows and doors and porches and building materials. Tonight, we are going to be focusing our presentation on those big ticket items. Ted Van Dyke is going to be offering testimony on how our project is congruous with the district on these big 3 items. But before he does, I would ask that you indulge me for a few minutes. I'd like to go through the congruity standard and what it is and what it is not. And the reason I would like to go through this is we have a lot of opinions out in the community, and they're well-respected opinions. It's just we need to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what this COA process is and what it is not, and what we are trying to accomplish tonight. So if the project is congruous, then state law says that the certificate of appropriateness should be granted. So what is congruity with respect to new construction? And as many of you all know, it's easy to get lost in the weeds here, but the city's design guidelines specifically say that congruity means new construction needs to be within the spirit and character of the district, and that the new construction is compatible and harmonious with the defining features of the district. Congruity does not mean identical. In fact, the design guidelines specifically discourage new buildings from being carbon copies of historical structures. The design guidelines say in section 3.3 that to preserve a district's historic character, new buildings must be visually distinguishable from historic buildings. The new building should take design cues from, but not copy historic buildings. So again, we are looking at a standard of whether or not our proposal is harmonious and compatible with the district, not whether it's a cookie cutter match or an identical carbon copy to existing contributing buildings. So what type of buildings are we going to be looking at to determine this congruity? The design guidelines are very specific again. They state that the new construction is supposed to be congruous with well-related buildings of the district. And well-related buildings has been defined many times over as the contributing buildings within the district, because those buildings are the ones that contain the defining features. For height congruity, the standard is a little bit different. The design guidelines narrow the field of contributing buildings to those defined as well-related nearby buildings. Specifically, the design guidelines say that the height of new buildings should generally fall within 10% of well-related nearby buildings. And it goes on to define the well-related nearby buildings as those being contributing buildings within 1.5 blocks of the subject property. The last concept I want to address, and then I'll turn it over to Ted, is whether congruity takes into account the proposed use on the property. And case law is pretty clear about this, as are the design guidelines. The answer is no. Congruity and the certificate of appropriateness process do not prescribe use. For example, should the property be used as a single family property or a townhome property or something else? Congruity determines whether new construction is harmonious with the historic structures from a design perspective only. To determine allowable uses, you would look to the city's comprehensive development plan and you would look to the UDO. And some things I want to make for the record and point out for the record about this property on use. 713 Oberlin Road has a future land use designation of office and residential mixed use. Per the city's comprehensive development plan, this land use designation is applied primarily to frontage lots along major streets where low density residential, such as single family, are no longer appropriate, which is the case here. And this makes total sense because Oberlin Road is a high volume, busy thoroughfare. The comprehensive development plan indicates that you want something more than low density residential along that right of way to buffer the single family homes to the back. You want to create some kind of street wall to block out that street noise from that very busy thoroughfare. And so that is why that land use designation exists there. So to develop the property with single family homes based on the comprehensive development plan, that would actually be inconsistent with the policies in that plan. 713 Oberlin also has a zoning designation of office mixed use, or OX. Although we are proposing townhomes on the property at this time, the OX district allows for higher density residential uses by right, such as apartments. It also allows for medical and professional offices and a variety of retail uses. The HOD designation does not change permitted uses into prohibited ones. As I stated before, the HOD doesn't prescribe use at all. It just kicks the project into the COA process for design. So as we move through this tonight, I would just ask that everyone keep those guidelines in mind, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have on the project. But at this point in time, I would like to call Ted Van Dyke from New City Design to offer testimony and evidence on how the project is congruous with those 3 big ticket items on height, massing, and setbacks and building footprint. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ted, let's hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Allison. Is my mic working any better?
Yeah, this is better. Thank you for that.
Good. Certainly. I think we're familiar with the site. Tanya, we can move on from this slide. Aerial view, it has been a parking lot since at least 1970. It was originally a overflow lot for the 702 office building across the street. And we can continue on. I think Allison has amply covered this. The only thing I'll add is the Urban Limited offers parking reductions and also, at least in the base zoning, stipulates that the building should be brought up close to the street and create a street wall along the thoroughfare in an urban fashion. And I know that may or may not be of concern to the RHDC tonight, but that is what the UL in that zoning indicates. We can move on. This is the district we are in, and you can see we are tangentially connected to the properties to the north and across the street. And I think we have another slide, and you guys have seen this, but we do not have any historic properties to the north or south of us along Oberlin. It is about 650 feet to the community grocery to the north. The district does not exist to our south, except for that one house you can see down there. So we're a bit of a peninsula here, and so just want to make sure that the board's taking that into consideration. Again, this is a slide that shows the 1970 development. There's no evident buildings on the site at that time. Keep me rolling. I'm going to skip through this one, Tanya. You guys have seen the photos. This is just a diagram of that distance to the community grocery and what lies between us and that first property. We can move on. We can move on from this. I think you guys are well familiar with the basic elements, and we'll come back to this when we're reviewing design. The Turner House, if you can go one back, Tanya. There you go. I will spend a moment on the Turner House. You can see that the eave height there is about 25 feet. You have a 12 and 12 pitch on that porch. You have a double porch. And I will also say that the houses on Oberlin Road, as this one shows and the Graves House shows, were meant to show prosperity and were built specifically to present a more significant street wall. I'll also point out, and we can come back to this, that the Turner House is approximately 15 feet from that near corner to the curb line. That's not the right of way, that's the curb line. The right of way, I couldn't determine out there, but I would suggest it's 7 or 8 feet on the other side of the curb. But we're gonna see, and I think the Plummer House, as you see there, has a different relationship, that there's a variety of relationships on this east side of the street between the structures and the sidewalk, the right of way. Some places the right of way has been claimed by the city of Raleigh, some places it has not. As we know, the Hall House was relocated. It was set back because of the geometries of the site. The Turner House sits in its original location. As I say, the corner of the porch is about 15 feet from the curb line there. And continue. These are non-contributing, so we'll skip past these. Just show them for reference. These were permitted, I think, prior to the completion of the HOD, but these are more interesting. These are the 900 block, and I think you guys may have seen these previously. They show a variety of relationships to the right-of-way, but this is where we drew our inspiration for aligning the structures on our site to the cardinal east rather than parallel to Oberlin Road. And you can see that from the curb line, the northernmost 907 is about 20 feet from the curb, about 12 feet from the property line. And again, it varies depending which house you're talking about and which where they sit on their sites. But that's an example of how these houses were traditionally sited on the west side, and we drew our inspiration from that geometry. And this is our site again, and showing the boundaries. I'm not sure if this is our new slide or not. We can probably pass through this one. I hope that our new slides, which have more dimensions, will be on there. We're not going to look at these tonight. They are more design. We'll bring these back to you next time. Again, tonight what we're going to be looking at is just the forms. I will let you know that we've reduced the heights of these buildings to 42 feet. The primary reason these buildings are as tall as they are, as I said last time, is not because we have a strong desire to create tall buildings, but we are trying to maintain the roof forms that are extant in the neighborhood. These now are 9 and 12 pitches. We've brought them down from 12 to 12 and 12. We've reduced the height of our brick foundations. And so I believe the tallest point on any of these structures is 42 feet. The height to the bottom of the second story eave, remember the Turner House was 25 feet. The height to that second story eave is now 22 feet, 6 inches. So we are, at least to the eave level, lower than the Turner House. Again, I think we mentioned this once before, we could build buildings that are somewhere in the 32 to 34 foot range with flat roofs, but we did not find evidence in the district that flat roofs had been used in structures, commercial or residential, at least none that are in existence now. So we stuck with the gable roof forms. We have clipped the corners of all the gables, as you can see, and we can talk about that more in our design session next time. But from a design standpoint, these are now 22 foot 6 to the eave height, and I believe the ultimate height of the ridge line is a maximum of 42 feet. And keep on rolling. You can see here the sawtooth pattern that's created by following the cardinal east direction, similar to the 900 block. We've got, and we'll talk more about our porches, stoops, and other elements, but the basics are there. One of the things guiding our relationship to the street is the fact that we have a minimum 6-foot depth porch on every unit, in addition to the mass of the building itself. And we've added porches to the north and south elevations of the corner units to help better relate to the residential structures that are farther back into the side street in the neighborhood. Okay. Another thing, and please, again, rather undeveloped design, but based on input we got last time, we have created a single family home here instead of a duplex. That's allowed us to bring the height down. Our porch eave line would be more in keeping with the eave lines of the home to our west there. And we think that that's going to make a suitable transition from the more intense development along Oberlin back into the neighborhood on Roberts. And we do have 2 houses on the south side of Roberts that are in the district. The rest of Roberts on the south side is not in the district. But we're trying to be sensitive and make that transition by creating a 2-story home here instead of a 3-story under eave configuration. Onward. Just a dead on elevation. The other thing some of you may remember is we did split this row into 2 distinct blocks of 4 to break our scale down even further and to put an 11-foot pedestrian walk between the 2 sets of buildings, just to air them out and reduce their scale and to give the street wall a bit of relief there. This speaks to our materials, and we can come back to this next time. This is just I guess our maximum is now 40 feet. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Anyway, this is just an exhibit so that the committee can see the dimensions that I mentioned while I was giving my narrative, and that they are documented here on this sheet. Same here. Just some relationships. This is the Bedford elevation showing the relationship of the structures to the house on Bedford, and reminding the committee that the lot directly to our west along Bedford is a vacant lot, and there's no structure on that site today. Here's the Roberts Street elevation, and again, showing that we're making our best effort to be sort of well related to the 2207 house by establishing some eave lines and ridge lines that align with some of the proportions of the house. I think this is the site plan exhibit. I don't think we need to look at that one, Tanya. I think we've got a better one that I sent, and we can skip over that one. Just as a matter of reference, this is, I believe, the 801 house prior to it being moved by Preservation North Carolina. And just as a reference of how that house related to the right-of-way and the sidewalk in its original position, it was no more than a foot or 2 from the sidewalk there. And hopefully we've got a new site plan somewhere.
Hey, Ted, this is Colette. The 2 that we're looking at right now are the new ones that you sent.
There you go. Very good. Let's take, yep. And so same title blocks, new drawings. I apologize, committee. Well, this essentially shows what we are proposing with our relationships. We're about 15 feet, give or take, and that varies along Oberlin Road, but you can see we're about 15 feet from the corner of the building there to the curb line. The city has a streetscape plan in the works here. They are going to provide a 6-foot sidewalk and a 2-foot brick transition to the curb. We're still in discussion with them as whether we would ultimately be required to provide a 6-foot planting strip and an 8-foot sidewalk. But in either case, that will fit within the design that we're showing here. And I've provided a number of of details and dimensions here for the committee to consider. It is a tight site. We don't have a lot of room to push these buildings around and still have a viable project. But we've done our best, and I did want to show you that both we have the cardinal directions of the building here are very evident, and that our distance from the curb line to our front porches there is very consistent with what we've seen in other parts of the district for structures with porches. I think I'll leave it there, Colette, unless there's something you think I've missed, and I'd be happy to take some questions and help with the discussion. Allison, do you want to wrap us up, or do you think we should, or is it time to let the committee ask us some questions?
I would be happy to give a summary after we take questions, if that would be okay with you.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is to hear from everybody that wants to speak and get all that out, and then we can deal with the questions one time. I'm certainly going to come back to you all, and certainly want Jennifer to be able to wrap up. That's what she wants to do. But if at this point, is Mr. Gorman wanting to say anything?
No, we appreciate the opportunity and we look forward to hearing your commentary.
All right, fine. Jim Anthony.
I would just like to say that I believe that Ted has done a terrific job of designing a project that fits the neighborhood, that is compatible with what we see happening immediately around us and beyond. We'll continue to own the office building across the street, which is 62 feet tall. And you've got a couple of office buildings on the same side of the street just to the north that are 45 to 47 feet tall. And we have shared this concept plan with some of the neighbors, and there's a lot of excitement about this project being available for those that are interested in downsizing out of larger homes or moving into a less maintenance intensive lifestyle. And so we're very enthusiastic about what's been designed, and looking forward to seeing it get built, God willing.
All right. Thank you for that. And if it's okay, members of the committee, we'll just go ahead and work through everyone, and then we'll come back to the discussion and just go ahead and have all the comments out, which may inform the questions we'll ask and be a little more efficient ultimately. So with that, and Ms. Ashton, yes, I'll come back to you, but in terms of these, shall we say, fact witnesses, I think I just hear from those folk and have that, and then we will have our internal discussions as well. So Sabrina Good, would you like to speak at this time?
My name is Sabrina Good, and I'm speaking in opposition to the plan. I will agree with Mr. Anthony that they did show the works to the CAC, which that is their initials that they're keeping. It's not part of the city CLC anymore. And the comments were that people said that they thought they were better than anything else they had seen before, which I don't think is a statement of enthusiasm. It's just a statement that it's been approved. My concern is the density and the mass of the space. Now, when I've done the calculations based on the 797 square feet at the ground level, I did an improvement from the last meeting that we're now at 0.49, and at the last meeting was 0.52. So that's just a smidgen of an improvement. Also, it is correct that Oakland is a very busy road, and I think the city has identified that, which is the reason why the street is being put in place and the number of lanes are being reduced on Oakland Road so that it can become more of a walkable neighborhood. So they are trying to correct the high volume of traffic that is in the area because it cannot be sustained because of the housing. Mr. Anthony's office is 62 feet tall, but the lot itself is lower to the road height, so it does not get the appearance that it's 62, so it's not on a level lot. I'm also in opposition to the lack of transition when you're northbound on the transition from the new proposed units to the houses on Bedford Road. There is a dramatic drop in roof height, and I don't think the porch roof is sufficient enough to take care of that lack of transition.
Anything else, Ms. Good?
I think that states it, other than I just would ask the committee to do the due diligence, as I'm sure they will, trying to make sure that we get the very best solution for the gateway to Oberlin Village, which is a historic district. And one thing that's very important, this is the very last block along Oberlin Road where you can actually visually see the historic older homes that were built in the 1900s. This height, without the transition, and Bedford and Robert being a little bit lower, it prevents being able to identify the area as being historic because of the height restriction.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, Art Ross.
Ross, and I am speaking in opposition to the request. I want to begin, though, by thanking the Commission for its service to our city. I've attended one of your previous meetings, and I've followed this whole process carefully. You have an extremely complex job that's very important. You recognize the need to preserve the history of our city, and yet you also recognize the need for development. And that's a very tricky mixture to administer on behalf of our city. And the tension that you deal with is especially true in this project and all along Oberlin Road. I certainly understand the street is a vital business corridor and yet also an attractive housing development site. But what I also know, it's a very important historic site for our city. I've been part of the Oberlin Road community since 1994 when I was called to be the pastor of White Memorial Presbyterian Church at 1704 Oberlin Road. It's a congregation that has a long history of worship with the two historic Black congregations in Oberlin. And over the years, descendants of the Oberlin pioneers have become treasured friends of many in our congregations, and certainly of mine. It was about 20 years ago when I was asked to become a mediator in an issue of concern that involved racial profiling. And since then, I've been invited to be involved in a wide variety of issues that have emerged that have created all of which have had some level of tension between the descendants of the Oberlin Village and the development that's gone on along Oberlin Road. I'm here today at the very specific request of the Friends of Oberlin Village leadership. And I want to join in opposition to the request before you for the same reasons that your staff has expressed concern and flagged for your special attention. The height of the proposed homes do not seem to me to be compatible with the adjacent historic structures or with the guidelines of the historic district. And we have shared that concern repeatedly in our meeting with the developer and the architect. I have had a variety of meetings with him, along with Sabrina. We've emphasized that the property is a gateway to the historic village and that having new homes compatible with the older homes is extremely important. And so I would ask you respectfully to affirm the recommendations of your staff and address the critical issues of height and mass. I thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. Now, having heard from everyone who wanted to speak, Ms. Ashton, or does anyone have anything else to say? And then I'll certainly hear from Ms. Ashton, and then after that, we'll turn to questions. And then after that, we'll close the public hearing and turn to discussion internally. So Ms. Ashton, anything you want to say at this point, or would you rather wait and see what all questions are asked?
Mr. Chair, my summary after the questions, and then I can tailor my closing to maybe address some of the commissioner's concerns.
All right, that'll be fine then. Folks, I will turn to questions, and so do any of you have questions you want to direct to Ted Van Dyke or to to any of these folks? If you'll raise your hand, I'll go with it. And if you think you got it, you just want to have the internal discussion, I understand that, but let's be sure we get all the questions so that when I close the public hearing, it probably stays closed. So with that, Janine McCall, if you got your hand up.
Thank you. Just a height question for Mr. Van Dyke. The house is now a family house, it sounds like, on Bedford. What is that height? I know it's not as tall as the ones facing Overland. Could you just clarify that for us, what the overall height is of that one?
Let me be sure. You were breaking up some, Janine. Are you talking about a house on Roberts or a house on Bedford or what?
I'm sorry, I think it was Bedford around the corner.
Okay. So Ted, do you understand the question?
I do. I think that house, we have a little bit of flexibility there, Janine, because we don't have a third floor on that one. I think we'd probably end up somewhere in the 34-foot height, 2 10-foot floors, 20, 22, 24 plus whatever we put on there as a gable. I think we're going to be in the 34-foot height ultimately. But again, we think we won't have to have a large dormer on the front of the building, and we can keep our eave line lower on that building by having just a 2-story structure. I will point out the Turner House, which I looked at again today, appears to be about 22.6 to its eave. I think it's about 34 feet, 35 feet tall, just counting the siding up the side. I wasn't able to actually measure it, but we would be somewhere in that range.
Thank you for that.
All right, further questions from members of the committee? Nothing further? All right. You have nothing further from members of the committee for the staff, for the applicants, or the opponents? Okay, then, Ms. Ashton, you didn't get that many questions to respond to, but why don't you go ahead and close? So, wait a minute, Rashay Height.
Oh, Nick, Tanya here. So everybody is muted. So when you say, can anybody speak? They don't have a chance to say anything. So why don't, if you want to find out, it would make sense, if you don't mind, that you sort of go to each one.
No, that's fine. I can see all the faces. I see all the faces and I see who raises a hand.
Oh, I thought you were asking about the people. My apologies. I thought you were talking about the speakers, not your commissioners.
No, ma'am. I'm getting questions from the commissioners, and I think everyone else has already spoken. And the only
never mind me.
All right, thanks. Now, are there other questions to be? Okay, Rashay Height. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one quick question for the applicant, and I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but have you all explored, the feasibility of kind of 2-story or 2.5-story structures on this site as far as an approach?
Ted Van Dyke, yeah, let's go ahead. It might as well have it out here. What about 2 or 2.5? So why don't you respond to that?
Absolutely, Rashay, thank you for the question. We kind of skipped over our architectural plans tonight because we were just talking about mass, but if we were to look back at them, you would see that the first floor of these units are 20 by 40. So half of that is a 2-car garage and half of that is for a bonus room. The second floor is living, bed, dining, and kitchen. And then up in the eaves, and we're trying to make these 2.5-story, and maybe you guys can help us as we come forward with, we're successful tonight with design refinements. That's where the 2 bedrooms are. So these units are relatively modest, which we think is appropriate and scarce actually in Raleigh these days. They're 2,400 feet total. Only 2,000 feet heated if you take the garages out. So going to 2 stories, we really would end up with sort of 1 bedroom on the ground floor and living, dining, kitchen, and not much else. So we did evaluate that. We took a shot at doing patios here, patio home styles, and only got 3 or 4. We really feel like this 2,400 square foot size, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath is a good unit fit and a good fit for the market. And it's just nothing that we can fit in less than the envelope that we're showing now. Of course, we're open to refinements if there's other ways we can reduce that apparent height as we move forward.
All right, thank you for that. Are there further questions from members of the committee? Okay, none. With that, then I'll take Tanya's suggestion, and I'll go back up go back through the list again, and I'm going to finish with Ms. Ashton and let her make any closing comments. Ted Van Dyke, you want to say anything else?
I'd just like to say that we've done our best, and we appreciate all the time you've spent with us to date. We're doing our best to create a project that sort of makes the best of a transition between a very busy commercial thoroughfare and a historic residential setting to the west. And I hope you will help us to make this a great project.
All right, thank you for that. Jim Anthony, anything else?
So, quick comment that I have had conversations with city transportation engineers that are working on the project, and one of the things that they are trying to do is slow down the traffic on the road and sort of push it off onto other corridors so that Oberlin has less traffic on it and it moves more slowly, and we're fully supportive of that. The second comment I would make is that I still feel as though, even though this parcel is a big blank spot on Oberlin Road, that the massing that's been proposed is appropriate for the context. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Sabrina, is good?
Yeah, so I would just say that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Janine had asked what the height was a house on Bedford. And if we're referring to 2206 Bedford, the stoop was about 30 inches from the ground. The ceilings in the house itself are 7.6. And so you're talking about probably about 19 feet high. So there's a drastic difference. And although it was mentioned that these units are modest, that's the square footage, but my objection is not the square footage of the house, it's the height. At no time do we discuss having patio or 2-story homes. It was presented to me that the garages were proposed to appease the neighbors so they wouldn't have to see cars. And anyone that is familiar with the historic fabric of Oakland knows that the blacks did not have the means to have garages or sometimes even cars. So it is very much a neighborhood where the cars are exposed and seen. So if you were to delete the garage and have that be a livable space, it very much could be a 2-story or 1.5-story unit. I don't feel like the city should be obligated to maybe push the boundaries of the rules just because someone has a desire to reach a certain level of profitability. We all make investments. Sometimes they're better than others. And then my last comment is just a correction to what Art Ross said. He mentioned that Oberlin is very important to the city of Raleigh. And I would just like to call out Dr. Ruth Little, just discovered within the last month that Oberlin Village is the last surviving antebellum free Black village in the entire state of North Carolina. So I would hope that would take in consideration that this is the last conflict that we have for the state of North Carolina. And so we should really do due diligence as far as reviewing and making exceptions or not making exceptions to the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Art Ross, anything else?
Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for hearing me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jennifer Ashton, any last comments? Then I'm going to close the public hearing and have internal discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just summarize the testimony that was put forward by Mr. Van Dyke. With respect to the height, we do believe that we are congruous with the district, the defining features of the district. As Mr. Van Dyke indicated, the eave height of the Turner House is around 25 feet. Our proposed eave height is around 22.6 feet, so we are lower than the Turner House. With respect to the overall height of the Turner House, Mr. Van Dyke, I believe, testified that the overall height was between 34 and 35 feet high. We are at 40 feet high for the townhomes along Oberlin Road. And then for the duplex along, I think it's Roberts, we are at 34 to 35, or we are within that range of the Turner height. So with that being said, I do believe that we're congruous with the Turner House, which if you take a look at the elevations of that, and I know we're not focusing so much on design tonight, but that our townhomes do mimic that Turner House look, and they're definitely inspired by that house. With respect to the massing, the size and scale, again, Mr. Van Dyke testified that we have worked really hard to make sure that the proportions of these buildings match the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding homes. There was even that sidewalk that was added in between the two groupings of buildings to kind of break up that scale. So again, the testimony tonight is that we are congruous with respect to massing. And then finally, with the third big ticket item that we're looking at tonight, the building orientation and setbacks. With respect to the orientation, Mr. Van Dyke did testify that we are orienting the buildings along Oberlin Road, consistent with that diagonal pattern up at the 900 block. And then we also are consistent with the orientation along Roberts. With respect to setbacks, Mr. Van Dyke testified for 903, 905, and 907 Oberlin. The setback range was from 12 feet to 22 feet. And our proposed setback along Oberlin is 15 feet. So we are congruous with the 900 block along Oberlin. And along Roberts, we are also congruent with the setbacks to the single family homes along that street as well. The setback range for the contributing structures was between 14 to 18 feet, and we are within that range. So with that being said, I believe the evidence and testimony put forward tonight shows that our project is congruent with the Oberlin Village Historic District, and that we would ask for an approval of our certificate of appropriateness. And thank you very much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and with that, folks, I'm going to close the public hearing, and hopefully we will not be reopening the same, and turn to discussion internally. Who would like to begin the process of commenting among ourselves here? Janine McCullough, what are your thoughts?
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make some comments about the overall height. I think that we're still not well relating to the, so in 3.3.7 of the guidelines says that design new buildings to be congruous with surrounding buildings that contribute to the special character in height, form, size, scale, massing, proportions, architectural style, and that the height of new buildings should generally fall within 10% of well-related nearby buildings. I think relating these new builds to the Turner House makes a lot of sense to me. It's on a significant street, and like we spoke about, I'm in agreement that, you know, in a neighborhood, often the more prominent and larger homes are built on the thoroughfares. So I think it's appropriate to compare it to the Turner House, but even so, it's still not within 10% of that height. I think it's, I appreciate that those eave lines are relating, but that height of the roof is just, to me, it's not well related to the Turner House, and that's what I think is a very similar sort of size house on that street. And the other thing I'd say is just, I don't yet see that, I have a little concern about the massing of the houses, because it doesn't appear that all of these townhomes have full width porches. And the reason that concerns me is the Turner House, it's on the front facade, it has a full width porch. So the primary facade sits that much further back from the street, if that makes sense, as opposed to the building, the footprint starts that much further. Sorry, the footprint of the porch might be, 14 feet from the street, but the main solid wall of the facade sits that much further back. And that's true of all of those smaller houses that you do see down the street on Oberlin and the 900 block of Oberlin. So I just think that could be a way that these townhomes could relate better if they would address kind of that street wall and consider the porch as something that is that transition zone, so that they don't have a different relationship to that street. So those are kind of two thoughts that I had on the project.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Brashay Height, you want to comment? What are you thinking?
I would agree with what Janine expressed with regard to some of the concerns about mapping and our articulation, and I think there could be more exploration about what these can do as far as the way, not the design necessarily, but the massing can transition between I guess from that Oberlin roadside to the neighborhood where the heights are considerably smaller beyond. Yeah, I understand that there's certain facade elements that are being nodded to try to negotiate that, but I think as far as the way that the massing is articulated in that right on those transition moments could be explored further. I'll leave it with that for now.
All right, thank you. John Reese, do you want to comment here?
Yeah, I'm gonna, again, I want to go back to what Sabrina Good said about this being a gateway and the importance of it being the last state enclave of this very culturally important section of Raleigh. I'd also like to reiterate that 3.31 talks about spaces between as well as spaces from and to, and that is relative to the neighborhood and the context of the neighborhood. What I've heard so far is that it is relevant to a building relevant to the Turner House across the street, but this neighborhood is not only that house and is not a bunch of those houses. Most of the houses in this neighborhood are one story and low slung peasant, lack of a better word, not peasant structures, but working man structures. 3.3.7 talks about massing, scale, and proportion. 3.3.8 reiterates proportion. Proportion is not scale. Proportion is not height. Proportion is a ratio, and proportion is not necessarily just the forms of those buildings. Proportion is dealt with the spaces between those buildings and the heights of those spaces and the widths of those spaces. I would recommend very strongly that the applicant go back and look at another project that was submitted to RHDC for the 1300 block of Glenwood, which talked about which put into an existing Glenwood, Brooklyn neighborhood, new townhouses. In that applicant provided an existing context analysis that was very thorough. It talked about the typical building height or the typical story height of the existing neighborhood, not just of cherry-picked specific buildings. It talked about the building spacing or the open space between the existing houses. It talked about the relationship of those buildings to the street, which I understand from this applicant that you talk about distances. I'm less wooed by measurements and distances and more about proportional ratios that talk about height, width, and depth. Finally, that the biggest thing that I think that the applicant could benefit from is a proportional study of the existing fabric of the neighborhood, and meaning that what is it a golden section? Is it a square root of 2? What are the existing proportional mathematics that make this neighborhood what it is, rather than just specific buildings maybe across the street or whatever? Because I think most of what was on this site prior to this becoming a parking lot is behind them, not in front of them. And part of that understanding is to go back into that neighborhood in the other direction and really get into the DNA of what existed, or what still exists in a lot of regards, that needs to be brought forward and be celebrated as that gateway, as Sabrina Good expressed. As it stands right now, I cannot support this application.
All right, thank you for that. Harold Millette, you want to express your thoughts here?
Yes, I would also like to just to echo the case 3.3.7 that John brought up, and my concern primarily is just the height of this project, and just at the same time, I remember hearing the applicant mention the tangential connection between some of the existing buildings on this corner. But I think it's also important to think about, at the same time, that corner is tangential to also the east and west side of this neighborhood. And if you are looking at this as an entryway into this historic district, this intense development, I feel like could jade the historic nature of it. So I would agree.
All right, thank you for that. And I will say for myself that I still like the sawtooth aspect of the face of the property. Interesting comments about the depth of the porches. The overall height is a substantial concern. I am not troubled by about using very limited setbacks from the curb or from the property line in this situation, given the material we have. And at the same time, I would agree that structures along Oberlin probably were some of the bigger in the district, and we have maybe 2 of them left, and it was similar in terms of some streets in Oakwood having the bigger houses, and the rest of the neighborhood not so much. So I'm okay to sort of model on the Turner house, or or even on the other one, the 2-story that PNC has. But the height of this and the effort to get 3 stories out of it, or a functional 3 stories with a nod to a 2.5-story look, is problematical, and the overall height is probably not approvable. And I'm not hearing anyone on the committee express the view that it probably is, and so we have a problem with the overall height. There may be some issues with the massing as well, and so to that end, I think the question, folks, is if that's where we are on it, is the appropriate thing then to defer action with this degree of unanimity with respect to height massing being a problem, and then rather than simply turn it down, or is the thought that we may as well turn down this one because we don't see how it ever get there? What are your thoughts with everyone having concerns about it? I mean, I'm fine to defer, I'm not trying to build in any delay for the property owners, but I think we're all saying it's going to have to go back to the drawing board and see where we are on it. What are your thoughts about that? If you raise your hand, I'll call on you. Janine?
I would be fine deferring it. I guess I just want to make sure that, you know, I don't know that do we need a reason to defer it that means we can defer it versus, you know, not approve it? I guess I'm not clear exactly on that mechanism.
Then procedurally, let me think about this a minute. We were trying to sort of get a determination as to this piece of it so that more pen and paper would not be expended on details if the overall concept was not working. And but that said, I think I will. John Reese, you got something you're going to say?
Well, I would be amenable to defer it because as long as we can give the applicant more guidance in terms of how they can proceed to make it more compatible with the existing district. And what I mean by that is providing studies which give us more of an understanding of the fabric of the neighborhood and how their project fits within that fabric, so that we're not discussing issues of taste or subjectivity, but we're talking about real mass space relationships that are concrete and we can point to as saying this is how the fabric of the neighborhood works, not just cherry picking specific buildings and saying it's gonna be of this scale. I think when that begins to happen, we get into subjectivity, we get into issues that are preferential and subjective. And there are ways in which this can be approached that keep us without having to delve into that realm. And I would have to leave that up to the applicant and its design and their designers to be able to interpret that as they should. But I do think there is a possibility for us to be able to defer this in a way if they come back with work that begins to really address the issues at hand.
Okay, thank you for that. Although I will say for the record that we commonly in all of our districts look at and point to exemplars of other houses that are well-related nearby structures. And the guidelines do allow and anticipate that.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I need to, because I want to illustrate that this is not about building just the mass. This is about the spaces between the masses. And so it is a figure ground understanding, a holistic understanding, not an object understanding.
Yeah, I think I understand you. All right, are there further questions?
Nick, this is Colette, and there's a train passing, so I apologize if you can hear that. But before you move to make a decision, perhaps opening it back up to the applicants to respond, maybe provide you some of the information as to whether it'd be a waste of their time or not.
That's fine, I'll do that, but I wanted to think a little bit more first, and then I'll certainly find out from them what are their thoughts about deferring and not. But in terms of providing I think I'd like for us to verbalize a little more about what guidance we think it needs to be shared as we look at this. And certainly I would say for my purposes that the overall height is too much, and whether it ought to be 35 feet or 32 feet or what, but the 42 feet doesn't work, and particularly with that amount of mass. I think breaking it up with the sawtooth is a big help, and I'm fine to try to reduce setbacks because so many of these were so close. during the period of significance for this particular district. And so any other comments, guidance-wise for the rest of you? Anything else, Janine, you want to say? And before I open back up to let Ted or Ms. Ashton respond to our discussion.
I would second what you mentioned, Nick, about those kind of concerns that you have. And then just speaking of proportion, I think particularly the proportion of the roof, I think is something that I would think could be studied and benefit the project by doing so with respect to the fabric of the neighborhood.
All right, thank you for that. Anything else, Brashay or Harold? None? Okay. Without objection, I'm going to reopen the public hearing for the opportunity to provide opportunity for Mr. Van Dyke or Ms. Ashton to respond to our comments. I'm glad to hear from the opponents as well, but for the moment, this is more, we're in a more challenging moment for the applicants than we are for the opponents. And I want to be sure they've had every opportunity to respond to the concerns that we're expressing here. So Mr. Van Dyke, do you want to say anything else, or do you want to leave it to Ms. Ashton?
I think we are both in agreement that a deferral would be appreciated. We appreciate all the feedback and the close study of our proposal. We've heard you, and obviously we need to circle up with the rest of our team and talk about next steps and our path forward. So more than needing or wanting a final vote or a final verdict tonight, we are very appreciative of the feedback we've gotten in the additional direction, and we'll take that into account.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. And I just didn't want to do anything that was going to cause delay if it weren't already going to happen anyway, Ted and the rest of you. So so members of the committee, I am prepared to close public hearing and entertain a motion to defer the matter in light of all these comments. Anybody resistant to that? Okay, so the public hearing is now closed, and I'll entertain a motion to defer the matter for further assessment by the applicants and opponents as well. John Reese makes a motion to defer, and a second by Janine McAuliffe. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. I see Janine, Harold, Brashay, and John, and I vote also to defer, so that's deferred unanimously. And we thank all of you. This is an important project, both for the property owners and for the district and for the city at large. And so we thank you, and we're certainly willing to do our part of the work to try to get this right, challenging though that may be. So with that, the next matter to be heard tonight is a new application, 530 East Jones Street. And I'll ask if, and that is number 03-2021. And I would ask that Aaron, Ashley Morris, Amy Costello, Declan Costello all be affirmed at this time. Do you and each of you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in the matter being heard before this committee with the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Aaron Morton?
I do.
Ashley Morris?
I do.
Amy Costello?
I do.
And Declan Costello? I hope I said
do.
that right. Thank you. Now, Aaron, if you will explain this proposal to us.
All right, this is case COA 3-2021 for 530 East Jones Street in the Oakwood Historic District. The work description is to remove deck, construct rear screened porch, replace window with door, and construct side entry porch. Next. This is a photo of the front of the house from 530 East Jones Street. Next, or from East Jones, it is 530. And this is the area where the side porch is proposed to be constructed along the side wall. Next. And this is the rear where the porch or deck and screen porch are proposed. Next. And a larger contextual view of the site. Next. And a side elevation as well. Next. And more of that side. Next. The staff suggestion is to deny in part and approve in part. And new information provided by the applicant is to shift the proposed side entry porch location. And they've provided to accompany that new plans and elevations, a new built mass calculation, and the addition of front yard shrub screening. Next. That's all.
Okay, yeah, that's the next one. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And Ashley Morris, we'd be glad to hear from you at this time.
Sure. Thank you for taking a look at this application. The owners are good with the staff comments and conditions for the screen porch. For the side entry, we really would like to have the side entry with covered porch. The big driveway paving strips lead back towards where the kitchen is located now. They're parents with kids who do not want to have stinky sportswear and shoes on their front porch or in their entry foyer. So the idea of having this small side porch, side entry, is of course a priority in their minds. The new proposed location is a little over 11 feet back from the front facade of the house. The section of the house where the side entry is being added was a side entry porch during the period of significance. If you look at the 1914 Sanborn map that was included in the application, you'll see a small dotted section there that shows the side entry porch where it was in 1914. We also included a written history of the house in the application, and this information is also supported in that. This house has been added onto over several times, but the original main mass of the house was really only one room deep. So we kind of asked the committee to keep that in mind, that where the side entry is now would be very close to the actual original rear wall of the house. Again, this proposed option is really what the owners would prefer to have approved, but they are flexible if the committee feels that this is not an approvable piece. And flexible meaning that we would still love to have a door and steps into the house on this side of the side elevation. And the location of the door and stairs are something we can talk about as
well. Okay. Let me ask you, Ms. Morris, can you tell us, with respect to this side entry business, what do you perceive to have existed during the period of significance at one point or another?
It sounds like from the information that we've seen and from the Sanborn map that it was a small side entry porch that was covered. And now it is part of the mass that we would be adding onto. It just got infilled over time into heated square footage.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Are the questions of Ms. Morris from members of the committee? Okay, did, Ms. Costello, would you like to address us?
No, thanks.
Okay. Hearing none is, so are there further questions of the applicants from members of the committee? Further questions for staff from members of the committee? As always, I want to get everything out before we close the public hearing. If we have concerns that we're going to need to bring out with other folks outside the committee. Hearing none or seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn to discussion internally. What do you all have to say? It's a very quiet group at this point in the evening. Must have been the last file took the starch out of you. Janine McCullough.
I'll say I think the revised location sits it back in a location from that front facade that I can see from some of the precedents is much more in keeping with what we're finding in the historical context. And I guess the only thing I'll say is, you know, it seems like mostly when the side porches were happening, those entrances from those precedents, they're actually, it may be that far off of the front corner, say 10 or 12 feet, but they look as if they're sort of hitting in the middle of a house, where this one does feel a little forward. But I think it was, I guess we didn't talk exactly about the screening, but I appreciate the fact that there's proposed screening there as well to kind of mitigate that view from the street.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the rest of you? John Reese.
I just agree with Janine's comment that I think by sliding that little porch down a little bit actually made a big difference. And I think it begins to solve the problem. And I think it was a good move.
Does that mean you think it needs to be slid down more, or are you okay?
I'm okay.
All right. Other comments from the rest of you? All right. Who would be inclined to make a motion that we can then discuss further? I, of course, can call on you, but I wouldn't mind a volunteer. Rashay? Rashay, how do you want to try the motion? Okay.
I move that based on the information contained in the application and staff's evaluation, in addition to the evidence presented in the public hearing, that removing the rear deck, constructing a rear deck, constructing a rear screen porch is not incongruous in concept with guidelines 1.3.1, 0.2, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 3.1.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 3.2.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and the following suggested facts 1 through 14. Let's see. And I think this is where I have to modify. That constructing a side entry porch is not incongruous in concept according to guidelines 1.3.1, 0.6, 0.7, and 0.8. I feel like I need to say something about in its revised location or in the way it's been shifted as proposed by the applicant.
Well, perhaps you can just go ahead and complete the motion and we'll see how to modify it, get it out here and get a second on it.
Okay. How do I need to complete the motion?
I think you could.
What else do I need to say?
I think you could change is incongruous to may be incongruous, and then we will modify paragraph, I guess that's
Paragraph
3.
Okay. So maybe in Congress, the side entry porch may be in Congress then?
Tanya Tully speaking up here. Y'all need to decide if it is or isn't. So it's either is in Congress or is not in Congress. Maybe is a term that staff uses to let you know you need to talk about it. You can say is in Congress in concept, then that lets you put a condition if you want a condition on it.
Okay, I think in Congress in concept is in Congress in concept, and then we can deal with it if that's okay, Rashay.
Okay, with the condition. Okay.
With conditions, yeah, and then we'll change what the facts were based on the submissions and comments in the hearing.
Okay. All right, I will start where I left off. Constructing a side entry porch is incongruous in concept according to the guidelines, section 1.3.1, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and the following suggested facts, 1 through 7. And we keep going from there.
1 through 7, and then you were going to modify number 3, I guess. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I right? It's not 5 feet anymore.
Right. It's, what is that depth?
This is Aaron. It will be set back 10 feet from the front wall of the house, the edge of the porch will.
Okay. So I say I recommend that the application be approved with the following conditions.
Wait a minute. Let's deal with the first motion. Let's get a second to Rashay's motion. John Reese seconds that motion now for discussion. And I'm inclined to think that we probably ought to modify the motion at paragraph B to change the lead in to say is not in Congress in concept, and then and is that what you did? And then you deleted the rest of that paragraph?
I think the modification to 0.3 is that the porch will be set back approximately 10 feet from the front wall of the main house. And that's what's getting agreed upon.
Yeah. All right. Any discussion on that? Anyone with a desire to amend or modify? Janine McCullough?
Could we make a friendly amendment just to say approximately 12 feet? Because that's actually what the dimension calls for, and I'd rather just put that out there that it was further back. And also don't need to talk about the screening at all.
Okay. Everybody understand that? Is that amendment acceptable, Rashay Height? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So now everybody understand the motion is amended. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. All right. Everyone voted aye, and I vote aye as well. The motion carried. Now, do you have a follow-up motion, Rashay?
I recommend that a certificate of appropriateness be issued based on, or the application be approved based on conditions 1 through 3 listed in the staff notes. Or do I need to read all of this?
No, I don't think you need to read all of them. Just looking to be sure we don't need anything else. Is there a second to that motion? John Reese seconds the motion.
Nick, this is Aaron.
Yes, ma'am.
Just jumping in on Janine's comments, there is a screening proposed, but we don't have any further information on what that will be.
And then what we need to do is, are y'all content that to have staff approve the details of the screening? Then I think we can add a condition 4 that the details of screening be provided to and approved by staff. Everybody okay with that? All right. In discussion, all in favor say aye. Raise your right hand. The motion carries unanimous. I'll vote aye as well. And so that matter is handled. And thank you, Ashley Morris, Ms. Costello, that you'll be dealing with staff from here. Ms. Morris, don't run far. The next matter to come before the committee is what I will call TBD Mosley Lane, and which is the rear of 542 East Jones Street. And Ashley, I'll remind you that we administered oath to you a moment ago. I'll remind you you're still under oath. And Colette, we've administered oath to you as well already once today. So Ms. Steele, I'll ask you, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, the matter being heard, will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Ms. Steele?
I do.
All right, thank you for that. Colette, will you explain this application?
I will. Wait a minute while it appears on the screen. This is application COA 0004 2021. It has been subdivided, but the subdivision has not yet been fully implemented in our addressing system. So it is still falling under 542 East Jones Street, and it will have an address on Mosley. It is in the Oakwood Historic District, and the request is to construct a new house, construct a driveway, remove 6 trees, remove a fence, and remove a shed. Next slide. So this is a view of the property from Mosley, and you can see there is a fence and shed existing currently. Next slide. This is another view from a bit to the east, looking back at the property. It is inside the wooden fence there that you can see. Next slide. And just for context, this is the property 542 East Jones that it will be in back of. Next slide. And staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions.
Okay, thank you for that. Ashley Morris, do you want to talk to us about your project and the conditions?
Sure. We, I think the owners are good with all the staff comments and conditions. We, tried to design a house that fits in both contextually with the historic district and also to be a good neighbor with Mosley Lane. So we're happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Are there questions from members of the committee? All right, I see no hands going up. At this point, then I'm going to ask Karen Steele if she would like to be heard at this time.
I don't have anything else to say except the address is 542 East Jones. I just want to make sure that's clear and not 504.
Thank you. We understand that.
Thank you.
Okay, and just for the record, Ms. Steele is one of the owners of the property in question, and I don't know if we ever got that stated. Any questions of any of these folks before I close the public hearing? All right, then I will close the public hearing and turn to discussion internally. Any comments or questions? Are you prepared to make a motion? Okay, John Reese, you want to try a motion here?
I will certainly try. I move that based on the information contained in this application and staff's evaluation and evidence in this hearing, that the construction of a new house, installation of a driveway, removal of 6 trees, and removing a fence are not incongruous in concept, according to guidelines 1.3.2, 0.6, 0.7, 0.9, 0.12, 1.5.5, 0.6, 0.9, 3.3.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 10, and 11, and 12. However, the removal of healthy trees may be incongruous according to guidelines 1.3.5 with the following suggested facts 1 through 35.
All right, I think that you heard the staff's comment a while ago about using the phrase "maybe" in Congress.
Oh, sorry, is not incongruous.
All right, now we'll come back to the question of the trees, but so there's a motion, and is there a second to that motion? Janine McCullough seconds the motion, and so is there any discussion on it? I think we will end up needing to waive the 365-day thing, but we can come back to that. Any discussion? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand, and the motion carries unanimously. And John, you got a follow-up motion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I move that we approve the application with the following conditions. As staff noted, 1 through 4.
Okay. Second to that motion. Verche Height seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye and raise your right hand. Again, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for that. And that carries. And Ms. Steele and Ms. Morris, you'll be dealing with staff the rest of the way. Thank you for sticking around to get to this point. Now, so that's it on the matters to be heard tonight. I think, is there post-mortem, other discussion, anything from staff that we ought to talk about here?
Yes, sir. Tanya Tully here. I wanted to bring up the item that I mentioned in the email that there is a potential demolition by neglect case in a neighborhood that does not have a neighborhood association. The typical procedure and policy for demolition by neglect cases is for a neighborhood association to send a letter to the property owner saying, hey, we see that there's some deterioration. The letter's better than that. They send it out. The property owner is given 6 months to, make some repairs. If the neighborhood feels like they have not seen sufficient repairs, then they will include that letter, but then reach out to the Raleigh Historic Development Commission and ask y'all to investigate whether or not demolition by neglect is occurring. What I am asking for is permission in this initial case for staff to write a letter on behalf of RHDC, similar to what a neighborhood association would do. So a friendly, please make some repairs. This is happening. These are the next possible steps. And then staff will come back in hopefully March, the March business meeting with a formal request changing the procedure on how to address this situation in the future. Open to questions.
Yeah. Now, are we, you mind giving us the address?
I forgot what it was. Hold on. Colette, do you remember?
John, do you?
Wait one moment.
809 Glenwood.
Thank you. It's 809 Glenwood. It's a one-story bungalow, frame bungalow.
Yeah. Okay. So folks, we're just trying to create something that's roughly equivalent to what we would do if the problem was in Oakwood or Boylan Heights, and we just happened, but in discussion, we would do the same thing on a landmark that wasn't in a district at all, because it would never be an association in that situation. So we're trying to create a parallel path to handle these. And so anyway, that would seem to be the appropriate way to proceed, partly because the property owner, if that's how much time they typically get in a district, then we ought to probably give about the same amount of time for somebody to figure out financing and deal with the problem. Are y'all okay with that? Any discussion? Then without objection, we will consider that is our interim policy on dealing with these issues until we can get something that works better in our bylaws.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything else, folks? All right. Well,
We actually,
yes,
this
ma'am.
is Colette. Also on the agenda, we had placed a discussion for you to follow up from the annual retreat, where it was suggested that we discuss past cases. Did we already talk about this? Was this last month? Incorrect.
Colette, this is Erin. I believe we started to talk about it, but we never resolved what kind of schedule we'd like to work.
Well, folks, let's figure out how we're going to do it so that we can address, but Colette or Aaron, maybe one of you can remind us of what was it we said at the retreat to start with.
So this is Colette. Retreat. It was suggested that you as a committee, us bring you previous cases that had been heard and were past the appeal period, so that we could have a conversation about how your discussion went, how the final project, if it has been completed, looks in comparison to what you thought you were reviewing and approving. And I think it was suggested that we do this perhaps quarterly, maybe every 4 months or so, to do a recap of, recent meetings. And one of the questions was whether that should follow a COA meeting, so in the postmortem like we are now, or if it should be a separate meeting, where you're not thinking about the cases that you just heard, but have time to process, old cases.
So I'd say ordinarily, the people on the COA committee are not looking for another meeting, but I would think that, first of all, Colette, I think quarterly might be every 3 months instead of 4, but I'm rusty on my math. But I would, if that's the case, then ordinarily the appeal time would have run if we skip a month after we dealt with it. Now that will not allow us time to think about the ones that, if we're going to look at the as-built, that could be a year. But we would have to have a tickler in the system somehow that even reminded us of which ones were there that are now eligible. If we're going to back up, say, 12 months and look at the ones on the as-built basis, and we were going to think about what we did every other month for the ones that are not quite so old. What do y'all think about what we ought to be doing there? Janine, you had your hand up.
Sorry, thanks. I know I was someone advocating for this in our retreat. My hope was that we were getting together sooner than later, because I was hoping to have a dialogue about the actual process and how we what came up in the meetings and questions that came of it. And I think waiting a year, I just think that's going to be too far out of my brain to think about it. So that's one comment. And another comment would be, I would really welcome it being a separate meeting. I know we will not already, but sometimes by the end of these, the sessions, I'm just a fog. So I wouldn't want to continue on with another kind of part B to these COA meetings personally.
All right, other comments from the rest of you? John Reese, you think same thing or different?
Yeah, what Janine said.
Okay, the rest of you feel that way as well? Okay, of course, you could do it so that that other meeting was done for this purpose. Tanya, does this have to be a public meeting and recorded and all that?
Yes, it does not. It will not be streamed live, but it will be the same as your other committee meetings where there is a link provided in the city calendar where folks can click and attend virtually the meeting, and then they get recorded and put up on YouTube.
Well, I was going to suggest we do it at a round table in the corner of the PR, but that sounds like it's not going to work. Janine, what were you going to say?
Can't this be seen as more of training for us? I mean, that's what I was imagining. It's just kind of this continuation because the COA is trial by fire, and we just jump into it and start. And my hope was it was almost like, a chance for us to get together and kind of talk about what is a challenge for us and how we can be better at it and things like that.
And those are noticed and recorded also.
Okay.
Typically when they're in person, nobody comes.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, they're always noticed as public meetings because it is, anytime there's a quorum.
So you're saying in theory, once the whole virtual world has calmed down and we can meet again in person,
yeah,
we may just be sitting around a table and that
exactly
people are welcome to come, but mostly that's just a part of conversation at that point. It's not documented.
But without the beer.
Right. That definitely has its weaknesses, but on the other hand, maybe if you had that meeting, you could at least walk across the street to that, because we used to go across the street and get a beer. That place is on the corner across from City Hall there, in one of those condo buildings. So anyhow.
Fortunately, however, there was never a quorum of the COA committee that actually went. So we weren't violating any laws.
Let that be reflected in a minute. So we did not violate the open meeting statute. Everyone was invited, but not everybody went. So there you go.
Hey, Dick.
Raz, you got something to say?
Just in case anyone is interested, the open meetings law is very broad, and there's a catch-all category for generally conducting the public business, which is sort of hard to sidestep if what you're doing is the business of the committee or the commission. But there is an exception for purely social gatherings. So that's, you can sort of see the linkage there between having a beer and informally chatting about work as opposed to officially conducting the business of the board. So that's kind of why we tippy-toe around that because of the breadth of the general conduct of business reference in the statute. I mean, that's not a yes or no. If you'd like more information or want some an opinion about a specific.
I don't think we do that, but it sounds to me like, folks, that the principal purpose of it would be the training, and so we probably should have the training needed to occur, and then the adjournment for the purely social.
Yeah.
So this is Colette again.
Yeah.
One of the suggestions at the retreat was that following each meeting, if there was a particular case that you wanted to revisit as part of this discussion in the future, to just let us know, and we'll keep a running list so that, when the appeals period has passed and we're able to talk about it, we'll be able to bring it up.
Well, I would say we're definitely going to want to talk about 713 Oberlin, but we're probably at least 2 meetings or maybe more, and possibly a lawsuit or something away from away from being able to talk about that one. But that one I think ought to be on the on that list. So
I've got another one I'd like to add, and that's the Hinsdale house, this house on Hinsdale, Little White House.
Which is, there is a COA case that is going to be on your March agenda.
okay. Any others that y'all remember right off that probably ought to be? Okay. Anything else that? Thank y'all for bringing that up, Colette. Aaron.
This is Aaron. Just before we move on from this piece of the discussion, did we land on how frequently we want to do it, even if we have to figure out if it's separate and where? And to defend Colette a little bit, I know Verche specifically suggested 3 times a year, so that would be 4 months. But I'm hearing we might want to do that more often.
Well, Raz, am I right that typically 60 days out, we know that from the timing wise in getting past an appeal, from when would the appeal time probably run from the ones we did tonight, for example? We got to approve the minutes before the clock starts to run, right? You're muted. You're muted.
Nick, it would be 30 days after the findings and conclusions are officially adopted by you, and I think that happens at the next successive meeting.
Right.
So it would probably be 60 plus days when you factor in the notice period on the appeal. It might be appropriate to go say 90, just to be sure.
Okay, y'all heard that. You want to go
90 days from the meeting itself, from the hearing itself, if you will.
Right, got that. Y'all okay with that? Everybody's nodding yes. Okay. Anything else on this issue or other things that we probably ought to talk about? Yeah, Janine?
I just know, I saw somewhere that we'd be talking about recusing ourselves or speaking at the start of the meeting, just in a process of disclosure. Is that on this meeting?
Tanya Tully here. If you have questions for Raz, I think he can answer them. The intent was for y'all just to take a look at the document that is a combination of a summary of, from Raz about what the various items are, and then in a cut and paste from the bylaws themselves. If you've read it and have questions now, go ahead. Otherwise, read through it and you can ask questions at this time.
Yeah, and I will say to you guys that what I did this time over that driveway was when I realized it might get resolved before today, but it might not, and I'd been hearing about it. I sent all of them an email, just let you know if you're wondering. I'm going to recuse on that matter, and so Fred then called me saying, "Why are you recusing?" And I said, "God, I've heard so much about it." He said, "Oh, I thought there was probably some other thing that y'all were representing in your firm or something." I said, No, I just heard all about the driveway, and I just not going to participate. And so I hated that for you guys, but that was what was going on there. But it is, I think, when you know you're going to have to recuse, I think it's not unfair to let the parties know that don't be thinking that you're going to be sitting up there, because somebody may be worried that you are. And that in this case, I didn't do it ahead of time, I think, but I did let y'all know that it was going to happen. So there was some warning about who was going to have to take the ball and go with it. And Verche was very careful to make sure she was late when it, because I had planned on dropping it on her, and but she made sure she was late so she could duck. But anyway, anything else?
I have one question, because what you just said brings up something, Nick, that I am questioning myself. for example, if there's a scenario where I feel like I know too much about a case or I have a very strong opinion about a case prior to coming on board, am I allowed to, in terms of recusing myself for sure, but then am I allowed as an interested property owner nearby that project to be able to weigh in and sign up to speak?
I think the answer to that is it has happened before. Well, think about it. Some of you, occasionally we've had people on the committee who had a project that they needed to talk about on behalf of their firm, and they could not only recuse but explain their project. And if you can do it in connection with presenting the project, then it's only fair you do it. You could also do it when you're opposed to one. It seemed to me. Raz, you want to comment?
I agree, Nick. We've had this conversation with staff. So long as the hearing that's being heard, the requirements for impartiality are met, I think you can be recused, and then you're free to be to appear as a witness.
Okay. So,
Janine.
Thank you. I wanted to say one more thing, and that I appreciate whoever sent that document out and kind of the rules of it all, because I was expecting you can always make a judgment call as to whether you can be impartial, but in reading through it, it says any business partner, et cetera, et cetera. There are times where you are, it seems like you are required to recuse yourself. So that was not something I even was aware of, so that was helpful.
Right. Well, and we do have to remember that so much of this is about appearances, even when you most likely it would be fine, but we're trying always to make this look as objective as we can, even when we're not going to be able to do all the math and proportions that John Reese would suggest we ought to do on every one of these. But anyway, yeah, we're doing the best we can, but you can't get all the subjectivity out of these no matter what, John. All right, y'all okay? Anything else from the staff? All right, well, I'm going to declare this matter adjourned, and I'm altogether ready for dinner at this point. See y'all later.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Not everybody thinks.